The summer of 1944 marked a pivotal shift in the Pacific theatre of the Second World War. The ocean, stretching from the American west coast to the shores of Asia, had become the stage for a colossal struggle between empires. For years, the Pacific had been a battleground of attrition, with each side vying for control of scattered islands and vital sea lanes. The Allied strategy, known as island hopping, aimed to bypass heavily fortified Japanese strongholds, instead capturing strategically important islands to serve as stepping stones toward Japan itself. This approach allowed the Allies to cut off Japanese supply lines and establish forward bases for air and naval operations. American industrial power surged to unprecedented levels, fueling the construction of vast fleets of warships, aircraft and landing craft. These armadas, supported by a relentless flow of resources, pressed ever westward, overwhelming Japanese defences with sheer numbers and firepower. The ultimate objective was the liberation of the Philippines, a sprawling archipelago whose recapture would sever Japan's southern resource lifeline and provide a springboard for the final assault on the Japanese home islands. For the Allied command, this was not merely a strategic goal. The Philippines held deep symbolic significance, representing both a promise to its people and a critical juncture in the Pacific campaign. Yet the path to the Philippines was blocked by a chain of islands transformed into formidable fortresses. Japanese engineers had carved bunkers, tunnels and artillery positions into coral ridges and volcanic rock, creating layered defences designed to inflict maximum casualties on any attacker. To protect the right flank of the Philippine invasion, Allied planners identified the Peleliu Islands as a critical target. Though small in size, their location made them a potential threat to the entire operation. Among these islands, Peleliu stood out. Its strategic value lay not in its size, but in its airfield, an asset that could project Japanese air power deep into Allied lines. Peleliu, a mere 6 square miles of jagged coral and tangled jungle, was dominated by a sprawling airstrip. The island's terrain was harsh and unforgiving, with razor-sharp ridges, caves and a relentless tropical sun. Military planners feared that if the airfield remained operational, Japanese aircraft could launch devastating raids against the vulnerable invasion fleet as it approached the Philippines, jeopardizing the entire campaign. Neutralizing Peleliu became a prerequisite for the larger offensive. The island was marked as a key objective, its capture essential to safeguarding the Allied advance. The operation, codenamed Stalemate 2, was meticulously planned. Amphibious landings would be supported by massive naval bombardment, with the goal of quickly seizing the airfield and neutralizing Japanese resistance. The 1st Marine Division, veterans of brutal campaigns in Guadalcanal and Cape Gloucester, were chosen for the assault. Their experience in jungle warfare and amphibious operations made them the spearhead of the attack. These elite forces were renowned for their discipline and tenacity, forged in the crucible of previous battles. Their tactics emphasized speed, coordination, and overwhelming firepower. Allied commanders, buoyed by recent victories, anticipated a swift campaign. Their confidence was bolstered by intelligence reports suggesting that Japanese defences were limited and could be overcome with a concentrated assault. However, these reports were tragically flawed. Reconnaissance underestimated the complexity of the island's defences, failing to detect the extensive network of caves and bunkers hidden beneath the surface. The battle was expected to last only a few days, a quick, decisive action to clear the way for the main thrust toward the Philippines. Yet beneath the tranquil surface, Peleliu concealed a deadly labyrinth. The island's coral ridges, known as the Umurbrogol, formed a natural fortress, riddled with caves and tunnels that would turn the battlefield into a nightmare. On paper, The plan was elegant, a straight line from Peleliu to the Philippines, each victory building toward the final goal. The American war machine, a juggernaut of steel and fire, had swept aside Japanese defences on island after island, seemingly unstoppable in its advance. The formula for victory appeared proven: overwhelming naval bombardment followed by rapid amphibious landings to seize key objectives before the enemy could regroup. Commanders expected Peleliu to follow this pattern. A brief, intense clash quickly resolved. The operation was planned with precision, every detail accounted for, every contingency considered. The expectation was a violent but predictable engagement. As the invasion force drew near, the world watched in anticipation, unaware that the coming battle would shatter all expectations. Peleliu, a sun-scorched speck in the Pacific, was about to become the site of one of the most brutal and controversial struggles of the entire war. Even before the first landing craft churned towards Peleliu's shores, a shadow of doubt hung over the entire operation. The decision to invade was not universally accepted, and the debate played out through a flurry of classified communications and strategic analyses. In the days leading up to the scheduled D-Day of September 15th, 1944, a powerful voice of dissent emerged through official channels. Reports from recent carrier strikes against Japanese air bases in the Philippines, relayed via encrypted dispatches, indicated that Japanese air power in the region had been crippled far more effectively than previously thought. Based on this fresh intelligence, a bold alternative was proposed in a series of urgent messages. Bypass Peleliu entirely and strike directly at Leyte in the central Philippines, accelerating the main invasion timeline. This proposal was quickly acknowledged and supported in subsequent communiques as strategic planners weighed the potential to save American lives and shorten the war. The argument was compelling. The garrison on Peleliu, if left isolated, would wither on the vine, cut off from supply, and unable to project any meaningful power. The debate intensified as more intelligence reports and strategic assessments circulated among the highest levels of command. Ultimately, the fate of thousands of men now rested on the decision of one individual, Admiral Chester Nimitz, the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. Despite the compelling arguments and a cascade of urgent recommendations from his most trusted commanders, Nimitz weighed the logistical complexity of modern warfare. The vast invasion force, with its thousands of marines and hundreds of ships, was already at sea, steaming towards the objective. Diverting or recalling such a massive armada on short notice was a monumental undertaking, fraught with its own risks and complications, as highlighted in a series of logistical reports and risk assessments. Furthermore, Nimitz saw value in Peleliu beyond its immediate threat to the Philippines invasion, believing its harbour could serve as a useful forward anchorage for the fleet. After reviewing all available intelligence, operational plans, and logistical analyses, the die was cast. This decision would become one of the most intensely debated actions of the Pacific War, with military analysts and historians scrutinizing the communications and strategic debates for decades to come. Adding to the controversy were optimistic predictions, based on faulty intelligence and overconfident assessments, that the battle would be over in 4 days, 5 at the most. This gross underestimation of the enemy's strength and resolve, revealed in post-battle analyses, set the stage for a tragedy. The invasion, born of strategic necessity, but shrouded in profound and lethal doubt, would test the limits of planning, communication, and the very nature of military decision-making in the Pacific War. Beneath the dense jungle canopy of Peleliu, a formidable system of fortifications lay hidden, its true scale masked from above by thick foliage and the rugged contours of the land. The lessons of previous battles were etched into the very structure of these defences, which no longer clung to the shoreline, but instead retreated into the heart of the island. Peleliu's fortifications were a radical departure from earlier designs, forming a deadly labyrinth of interconnected strongpoints. The defensive network was meticulously planned, abandoning the vulnerable beaches in favour of a deep, layered system that exploited every natural advantage. The entire strategy revolved around a defence in depth, with fortifications designed to slow any advance, inflict maximum damage and withstand prolonged assault. Peleliu was transformed from a simple outpost into a veritable fortress, its surface bristling with hidden strongholds. The island's unique and unforgiving terrain formed the backbone of its defences, with natural obstacles shaping every line of resistance. At the centre stood the Brogal highlands, a maze of jagged coral limestone ridges and hills, their surfaces pitted and scarred by millennia of erosion. This hellish landscape, later known as Bloody Nose Ridge, offered countless vantage points and natural cover, making it an ideal defensive bastion. Over months, the ridges were honeycombed with a vast network of interconnected caves and tunnels, their entrances expertly concealed among the rocks. More than 500 major caves were blasted and dug into the stone, each one fortified with thick concrete and heavy steel doors to resist bombardment. These were not mere shelters, but interlocking strongpoints, barracks, command centres and firing positions, engineered to withstand the heaviest attacks and provide overlapping fields of fire. The entire defensive plan was a masterpiece of attrition, designed to grind down any attacker through relentless resistance. The fortifications were built for endurance, not for dramatic counterattacks, with every position designed to maximize survival and lethality. There would be no reckless charges, only silent, patient defense from within the coral labyrinth. The garrison's instructions were clear. Hold fast in the fortified depths and let the enemy come to them. Every ridge, cave and pillbox was carefully pre-sighted for artillery and mortar fire, creating deadly kill zones across the island. The fortifications were designed to absorb the fury of pre-invasion bombardments, their occupants shielded deep within the coral as shells exploded harmlessly above. The scale of this defensive network was staggering, its complexity hidden from any observer approaching the island. Pre-invasion reconnaissance and intelligence efforts failed to detect the true nature of the fortress, its secrets buried beneath layers of coral and camouflage. The bombardment that was meant to shatter the defences instead left most of the fortifications intact, with shells bursting harmlessly against the resilient coral or missing the hidden cave entrances entirely. The approaches to Peleliu gave no hint of the deadly maze awaiting inland, the true strength of the defences masked by silence and shadow. Beneath the surface, a new and far more lethal form of resistance lay in wait, its fortifications ready to challenge any who dared to invade. The morning of September 15th, 1944, dawned hot and humid, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of salt and cordite. For 3 days, American battleships and cruisers had unleashed a relentless barrage, their massive naval guns thundering as they hurled thousands of tons of high explosives onto Peleliu. The shoreline was consumed by smoke and fire, the bombardment transforming the once lush jungle into a scorched, cratered wasteland. Explosions erupted in apocalyptic waves, sending plumes of black smoke skyward and leaving the terrain pitted and barren. The beaches appeared lifeless, stripped of vegetation, the sand churned and blackened by the relentless shelling. As the amphibious tractors known as LVTs began their final approach toward the designated landing zones of White and Orange Beach, The illusion of devastation was shattered by the sudden eruption of hidden weaponry. The first waves of LVTs churned across the coral reef and into the shallow lagoon, their steel hulls slicing through water littered with debris and the remnants of shattered coral. Concealed artillery and anti-boat guns, perfectly camouflaged among the rocks and foliage, waited in silence, their barrels trained on the kill zones. Suddenly, a torrent of heavy artillery, anti-boat shells and mortar rounds erupted, the water erupting in geysers of spray and shrapnel as shells found their marks. Tracer rounds stitched the surface, and precise shell bursts sent shock waves through the lagoon, the accuracy of the fire leaving no safe haven. LVTs were torn apart mid-water, their metal hulls ripped open by direct hits, debris and equipment scattering across the waves. Machine guns, hidden within reinforced concrete pillboxes at the water's edge, unleashed streams of bullets that raked the surf and battered the ramps of the surviving vehicles. The beaches became a maelstrom of violence. Explosions tore through the sand, shrapnel whirled through the air, and gunfire crisscrossed in deadly patterns. Smoke and debris filled the air, obscuring the landscape and amplifying the chaos as the environment itself seemed to convulse under the onslaught. The only cover was the twisted wreckage of vehicles and the shallow depressions in the sand as shells continued to rain down, detonating with deafening force. A rocky promontory on the left flank, later known as the Point, dominated the landscape, its fortified gun emplacements commanding a wide arc of the beach and lagoon. Camouflaged bunkers and gun ports, expertly concealed among the rocks, unleashed withering fire that swept across the open sand and water. The terrain was soon littered with the wreckage of vehicles and the scars of countless explosions, the sand stained and pitted by the relentless barrage. The chaos of battle left the environment in ruins, with smoke drifting over the shattered landscape and the thunder of artillery echoing off the ridges. The advance inland was a slow crawl across open sand, every yard contested by hidden weapons firing from the ridges and pillboxes above. By the end of the day, the battered beachhead was a narrow strip of devastated land, still under constant fire and choked with the remnants of battle. The objectives remained out of reach, the terrain offering little shelter as the bombardment continued without pause. The cost was already staggering, the beach littered with the detritus of war, wrecked vehicles, spent shell casings, and the scars of relentless shell fire. The notion of a swift victory had vanished, replaced by the grim reality of a battlefield transformed into a nightmarish landscape of destruction. The environment itself had become the enemy, every inch of ground contested, every approach covered by hidden guns and the ever-present threat of sudden violence. The battle for Peleliu was now a slow, agonizing struggle against a landscape fortified with cunning and bristling with weaponry, a place where chaos reigned and survival was measured in moments. As night fell over the devastated battlefield, the chaos and destruction lingered, a grim prelude to the horrors yet to come. Once the precarious beachhead was established, the focus shifted immediately to the island's airfield, the most critical objective for the operation. This flat, open expanse of coral runway was the primary strategic reason for the invasion, offering a vital base for air operations and denying its use to the Japanese. The airfield, however, was situated on a wide, exposed plain, directly overlooked by the fortified ridges and hills of the Umurbrogel Massif. Advancing across this open ground meant traversing a landscape stripped of cover, littered with shell craters, barbed wire, and anti-tank obstacles. Japanese defences included camouflaged gun emplacements and pre-sighted artillery, hidden in the ridges and ready to unleash devastating fire on any movement below. Mortar and artillery fire churned the coral ground into lethal fragments, while machine guns swept the field with deadly accuracy from multiple concealed positions. Sherman tanks were brought up to provide fire support, their tracks grinding over the exposed coral as they targeted enemy positions in the ridges. Yet, these armoured vehicles were themselves vulnerable to hidden Japanese anti-tank guns which targeted them from the high ground. The environment posed its own challenges, with temperatures soaring above 100 degrees Fahrenheit and heat shimmer distorting the battlefield. Water and supplies were scarce, and the battlefield was a chaotic expanse of burning vehicles, shattered equipment and debris scattered across the white coral. Progress was made crater by crater, with vehicles and equipment inching forward under relentless fire, each yard gained at great cost. By the second day, armoured units and equipment had secured the airfield, establishing a tenuous hold on the strategic ground. Yet the Japanese still controlled the high ground, continuing to rain down artillery fire and rendering the airfield unusable for operations. The battle now shifted from the open airfield to the next phase, a brutal contest for control of the island's mountainous, fortified heart, where the landscape itself became the greatest obstacle. With the airfield nominally secured, attention shifted to the relentless source of resistance, the Umabrogel Mountains. This jagged labyrinth of coral ridges, grimly named Bloody Nose Ridge, formed the core of a formidable defensive fortress. The geography itself was a weapon, an unforgiving maze of razor-edged coral, steep inclines and narrow defiles. The coral rock was so dense and unyielding that it defied any attempt to dig into it, offering only the scant shelter of outcroppings and craters. Artillery and mortar shells, instead of being absorbed, detonated on the surface. Each blast shattered the coral into thousands of razor-sharp fragments, multiplying the lethality of every explosion. The ridges and ravines created a battlefield of confined spaces, sudden drops and hidden approaches, amplifying the chaos of conflict. Hundreds of fortified caves honeycombed the ridge, each one a strong point carved deep into the coral, interconnected by a labyrinth of tunnels. Concealed openings and camouflaged entrances dotted the landscape, blending seamlessly with the jagged terrain and making detection nearly impossible. Every ridge, ravine and crevice concealed new threats, with the ground itself hiding dangers beneath its surface. The tunnel network allowed for constant movement beneath the surface, enabling positions to be reoccupied and defences to shift unpredictably. The battlefield was three-dimensional, with threats emerging from above, below and every side, turning the landscape into a deadly maze. The aftermath left the coral ridges scarred and shattered, pitted with craters and blackened by fire. The relentless assaults left the ground littered with debris, the coral stained and broken by the violence of battle. The landscape bore silent witness to the devastation, its features forever altered by the struggle. The oppressive geography and fortifications imposed a psychological weight, the silence between bombardments heavy with tension. The confined spaces, filled with debris and smoke, became the defining feature of the ridge's nightmare. The heat radiated off the coral, intensifying the already harsh environment and compounding the devastation. By the end of the first week, the ridge was marked by the scars of relentless bombardment and the detritus of conflict. The battle devolved into a static, attritional struggle, the coral ridges standing as mute testimony to the ferocity of the fight. The initial hope for swift progress faded, replaced by the grim reality of a prolonged contest with the landscape itself. The ridges, unyielding and treacherous, resisted every attempt to subdue them, consuming all efforts directed against them. The aftermath was a landscape transformed, scarred, battered and silent, the coral ridges bearing the weight of all that had transpired. Bloody Nose Ridge revealed the limitations of conventional approaches, forcing a reckoning with the true cost of underestimating both the ground and its fortifications. The geography and fortifications demanded new, more brutal methods as the nightmare of Bloody Nose Ridge continued to haunt the landscape. The relentless defences of Bloody Nose Ridge forced a dramatic transformation in the tools and tactics of war. Gone were the days of direct infantry charges. In their place, the battlefield became a proving ground for machines and firepower. The M4 Sherman tank, once a symbol of armoured might, now took on new roles, its steel hull bristling with modifications for siege warfare. Explosives became the language of assault, with satchel charges and dynamite prepared to reshape the very landscape, sealing off enemy strongholds with thunderous force. Among the most fearsome innovations was the flamethrower tank, its modified turret capable of unleashing torrents of burning fuel into the labyrinthine caves. The resulting infernos consumed everything within, the fire's heat warping stone and devouring oxygen in a suffocating embrace. Armoured bulldozers, their blades caked with dust and debris, became engines of entombment, burying fortifications beneath tons of rubble. Overhead, the air war intensified, with aircraft now able to launch rapid, low-altitude sorties from hastily constructed airstrips. Some missions lasted only seconds, the roar of engines followed by the thunder of explosions as bombs found their mark. Corsairs carried a new and terrifying payload, napalm, a weapon designed to cling and burn with unrelenting ferocity. When released, these gelid gasoline bombs erupted into firestorms, their heat and smoke transforming the coral ridges into rivers of flame. The environment itself became a weapon, scorched earth, shattered stone and choking smoke forming a barrier as impenetrable as any wall. Artillery and explosives pounded the ridges, each blast reshaping the battlefield and sealing off the labyrinth below. The campaign evolved into a calculated siege, each machine and weapon playing its part in a relentless industrial assault. The once green ridges were reduced to a charred wasteland, a testament to the overwhelming might of machinery and modern weaponry. In this new phase, the island was not conquered by men alone, but by the systematic, unrelenting force of machines and fire, a brutal symphony of the industrial age. As the tactical focus shifted to siege warfare, the logistical demands on Peleliu grew immense. For over a month, supply convoys braved shell-torn trails to deliver food, water and ammunition to the front lines, while engineers worked tirelessly to keep the vital routes open through the devastated Umabrogol ridges. The relentless fighting left the landscape scarred and littered with the remnants of battle, discarded supplies, spent munitions, and hastily constructed depots blending into the battered terrain. To support the coming relief, engineers expanded supply routes, built temporary bridges, and established new fuel and water points to sustain the incoming forces. Medical and logistical teams set up forward aid stations and field kitchens, while communication lines buzzed with updates to coordinate the massive transfer of men and materiel. The landscape itself was transformed, jungle flattened for supply dumps, new roads snaking through blasted ridges, and the scars of constant bombardment visible from above. As the relief operation began in mid-October, the logistical effort intensified, with fresh supplies and equipment arriving to support the incoming 81st Infantry Division. The new troops found the island's infrastructure improved, marked supply routes, refueling points, and well-stocked depots ready to sustain the ongoing siege. The 81st Division inherited not only the battle but also the logistical apparatus, demolition supplies, flamethrower fuel and artillery ammunition stockpiled for the final push. Over the next 6 weeks, the landscape continued to change as supply lines kept pace with the slow, methodical advance through the ridges and caves. The battle's duration far exceeded initial estimates, and the logistical network adapted, expanding to meet the demands of a campaign that stretched on for 73 days. By the end, the relief effort had not only sustained the fight, but had also left a permanent mark on Peleliu's landscape, a testament to the immense logistical undertaking behind the battle's long, gruelling conclusion. When the guns on Peleliu finally fell silent, the island itself bore the scars of devastation. The once lush landscape was transformed into a wasteland of shattered trees, scorched earth, and pitted coral ridges. The environmental impact was immediate and severe. Explosions and relentless bombardment stripped the island of vegetation, leaving behind barren stretches of land and polluted lagoons. Toxic remnants of war, oil, fuel and chemicals seeped into the soil and water, disrupting the fragile ecosystem and contaminating the island's natural resources. Equipment left behind, ranging from rusting tanks and artillery to crates of unused munitions, became a permanent part of the landscape, slowly decaying under the tropical sun. The extensive network of bunkers, caves and trenches carved into the island remained as haunting reminders of the battle, gradually reclaimed by nature, but never fully erased. The physical changes to Peleliu were profound and lasting. Bomb craters and shell holes scarred the terrain, while coral reefs near the shore were shattered by naval gunfire and explosions. Over time, nature began to reclaim the island, with new growth emerging among the ruins. Yet, the environmental wounds and the relics of war remained, silent witnesses to the battle's destructive legacy. The aftermath of Peleliu stands as a stark reminder, not only of the human cost, but of the enduring impact that war leaves on the land itself. Gap 3S. The Battle of Peleliu was not only a clash of soldiers, but also a showcase of military technology and equipment that defined the era. Among the most formidable machines on the battlefield were the tanks. The M4 Sherman, a staple of the U.S. forces, rumbled across the island's rugged terrain. Its powerful 75 mm gun and thick armour made it a formidable opponent, capable of taking on enemy fortifications and providing crucial support to infantry units. Gap 3S artillery played a pivotal role in the conflict, with both sides relying heavily on their firepower. The American 105 mm howitzer was a key asset, delivering devastating barrages over long distances. These artillery pieces were strategically positioned to maximize their impact, pounding enemy positions and softening defenses before infantry advances. Gap 3S. The Japanese defenders, entrenched in a labyrinth of bunkers and caves, utilized the Type 97 Chiha tank. Though outmatched by the Shermans in firepower and armour, these tanks were effectively employed in the island's dense jungle and rugged terrain. Japanese artillery, including the Type 91 105 mm howitzer, was also a significant threat, delivering accurate fire from concealed positions. Gap 3S fortifications on Peleliu were a testament to the ingenuity and desperation of the Japanese forces. Bunkers constructed from reinforced concrete and coral provided formidable defensive positions. These fortifications were interconnected by a network of tunnels, allowing defenders to move unseen and launch surprise attacks. The intricate design of these bunkers, with multiple firing ports and thick walls, made them resistant to bombardment and difficult to assault. Gap 3S. The U.S. forces brought in specialized equipment to counter these defenses. Flamethrower tanks, like the M4A3R3 Sherman, were used to flush out defenders from their fortified positions. These tanks, equipped with a flamethrower in place of the main gun, unleashed streams of fire that penetrated bunkers and caves, neutralizing the enemy within. Gap 3S. As the battle raged on, the technological prowess of both sides was put to the test. The machinery of war, tanks, artillery and fortifications, played a crucial role in the ferocity and outcome of the Battle of Peleliu. Each piece of equipment, from the rusting hulls of tanks to the shattered remains of artillery, now lies silent, a testament to the technological conflict that unfolded on this small Pacific island. Before war touched Peleliu, the island thrived in lush tropical splendor. Thick jungles of pandanus and coconut palms crowned the limestone ridges, their roots entwined with wild orchids and ferns. Mangrove forests hugged the shoreline, sheltering tidal pools teeming with crabs and darting fish. Birdsong filled the air, imperial pigeons, kingfishers and fruit doves weaving through the emerald canopy. The coral reefs surrounding the island glittered with life. Sea turtles glided over vibrant sponges and schools of fish flickered in the clear turquoise water. But the arrival of war changed everything. Explosions shattered the silence, uprooting trees and scorching the underbrush. Artillery shells gouged craters into the coral, flattening swathes of jungle and leaving the landscape pockmarked and barren. The once bright coral reefs were clouded by debris, and the mangroves, vital to countless species, were torn apart by landing craft and tank treads. In the aftermath, the island's scars were stark. Charred tree stumps and splintered trunks dotted the hillsides. With the canopy gone, sunlight bleached the exposed earth, and erosion washed away the thin soil. Many birds and animals vanished, their habitats destroyed. Silent now, the forest floor was littered with twisted roots and the rusting remains of war machines, slowly being reclaimed by creeping vines and moss. Yet, even amid devastation, life persisted. Shoots of grass and hardy shrubs pushed through the rubble, and over time new leaves unfurled where once there was only ash. Nature, patient and resilient, began the slow work of healing Peleliu's wounds, weaving its greenery around the silent witnesses of battle.